Hey, welcome. Thanks for joining me. I'm embarking again on another Study of the Greats study painting of a Ralph Albert Blakelock painting called Moonlight. It seems like he has quite a few paintings by that title. In this case, I'm going to make some changes selectively, and I'll highlight those in a minute. But I just wanted to read a quick excerpt from an essay that's posted on the Quest Royal Fine Art LLC website. The subtitle for the website is Important American Paintings, Artist Spotlight, Ralph Albert Blakelock. It's quite a nice article or essay, but I'm just going to read from the section here that speaks to his time traveling west and his experience and influence upon his work by the landscape out there, among the landscape, other artists, and the Native American culture. So it looks like right around the time of his graduation, or at least his decision to leave the National Academy of Design in 1867, about 2 years later, he set out on his inaugural Western trip. This journey provided to be crucial to his artistic vision and influence on his work for the rest of his life. While the cross-country trips were becoming somewhat common amongst 19th century artists, most famously Albert Bierstadt and Thomas Moran, they typically embarked on them as part of government-sponsored expeditions. Blakelock, however, traveled alone. This is where I think he's particularly brave. I can't imagine what that must have been like back then. By railroad and stagecoach, he made his way through the territories of Nebraska, Kansas, Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, Nevada, and California. Wow, he went all the way to the Gold Coast there. While the expansiveness and the wonder of the landscapes impressed him, as it did other artists, it was the time spent with various American Indian tribes that had a particular effect. From Fort Pierre in present-day South Dakota, he traveled into the wilderness alone on horseback and spent time with tribes of the great Sioux Nation. At a moment when Native Americans were still holding on to many of their traditional practices, as white expansion was rapidly taking hold around them, Blakelock felt that they provided a mystical and ancient connection to nature. Indian encampments became a major theme in Blakelock's work, but rather than purely historical scenes like those created by George Catlin, Blakelock applied his unique vision to the landscape of the West. As Mark Mitchell describes, they were documents of his experience and observations, but with time they became documents of his memory, as well as the memory of the nation at large. His early Western landscapes and primeval forests foreshadowed the style he would later develop, in which mood superseded the importance of geographical detail. And I imagine to some degree that was the case with this painting as well. You can see that a lot of details are excluded. He must have worked pretty hard to decide which details not to bring into the painting itself. At the expense of detail came some stark contrast in values and also some simplification of shapes, which actually makes this painting pop a little bit more than it probably would if we tried to account for every leaf and pine needle and every bit of stone and every ripple in the water. So, very simple painting in many ways. And I'm trying to take care to layer thin washes of color to try and recreate some of the effects that he created. I imagine with the work that I'm doing here, I'll get this done in about 3 sittings. He probably took quite a bit longer. As mentioned with earlier Blakelock painting studies, he had been documented and known to take years sometimes to complete a painting, trying to find a look and a feel to a painting that came close to his recollection of his journeys out west. One interesting thing, going through a lot of the paintings that Blakelock produced that I could find images of, and perhaps maybe this will be one of my next episodes of Study the Greats. There's a Ralph Albert Blakelock painting from Hawley, Pennsylvania, which is not too far from where I live here in the Poconos. It's just a little ways north, up near Lake, where Lake Wallenpaupack is now. And same thing, as was the case with most of his work. He was a masterful simplifier, and at some point maybe we'll be able to replicate that work as well. As I was reviewing some of the biographical information that I was reading from earlier, I saw a little bit more detail around one of the first episodes leading him to some challenges with mental health. From the same essay, I'll read the following. At the same time as his burgeoning success began, he was struggling both financially and personally. In 1886, the popular Harper's Weekly singled out his A waterfall Moonlight, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, displayed at the National Academy of Design, and hailed it as best in landscape in exhibition. The author admitting an unmixed surprise at seeing attributed to him a landscape so powerful. But it was also the year of the birth of his fifth child. He had 9 with his wife altogether. Tragically, the death of his 2-year-old daughter. The stress continued to mount in this way, but also financially, until March of 1890, where he suffered his first mental breakdown and was taken by his brother to Flatbush Insane Asylum. The brief time he spent there served him well, and when he was released, Kathalina Lambert allowed Blakelock, Cora, and their 4 children to come to his estate up in Hawley, Pennsylvania, to convalesce. Upon their return to New York, Blakelock began to work out of fellow artists and later president of the National Academy of Design, Harry Watrous' studio in the Sherwood building. It was there that Blakelock painted his masterpiece, Brook by Moonlight, which is in the Toledo Museum of Art. So that was the first of his episodes with mental illness. And as I mentioned in the last Study of the Greats episode where I featured a Blakelock painting, he spent much of the last decade of his life in hospitalized, being treated for mental illness. And tragically, the staff and the administration didn't recognize him for his fame in the art world, and often attributed his claims of having artwork being featured in major museums as part of his mental illness. Also, while reading the same biographical information, I came to learn that Blakelock spent part of his life living in nearby East Orange, New Jersey, not far from where I grew up. He lived with family, and at that time he worked with a couple of other artists as a teacher, and also would paint plaques at E.C. Meeker's Art Novelty Shop, which is also located in New Jersey. So, with that, just want to point out a few details about this painting. Very limited palette was used with this painting. We have burnt umber, we have ivory black, we have a little bit of white, we have a lot of yellow ochre, and that, for the most part, is it, aside from a little wash within the sky and some of the water effects, where I applied a little teeny tiny bit, almost dry brushing of ultramarine blue, and a little tiny bit of cadmium red for the fire in front of the teepee. But for the most part, it is a very limited palette, and I think that's part of the allure of this painting. So a couple of other details. I consciously chose to leave out the actual indication of the moon. I like the appearance of this painting, my rendition of it, leaving that to the viewer's imagination. In the original painting, you'll see an actual depiction of the moon peeking out alongside of the tree. And then you'll also see one other object, a lone Indian warrior on a horse under the tree, which is one of the main focal points of the painting. I elected to leave that out. I wanted to leave a feeling of solitude, aloneness within this painting, and I felt like, at least in my rendition of it, it was more well achieved by leaving that Native American warrior on horseback out of the painting. Maybe I'll try it again and I'll try to include him. But for now, that's it, and I'll leave you with some music. I appreciate you joining, and if you've enjoyed this, if you find it helpful in any way, please give me a like, subscribe, and share. Have a great day and stay well.